So go with me on a journey and imagine a community. Imagine this community attracting people from around the whole world. Imagine this community being purpose-built for its residents and also keeping in mind recruiting the next generation of residents. Imagine this is a man-made community with amazing overlooks and red, jagged rocks and crystal clear blue mine lakes. Imagine paved trails throughout that entire environment. And imagine a mountain bike trail system that's purpose-built, that can take a 70-year-old man and make him scream for joy like a schoolboy. But imagine that community on its knees, without hope, only 34 years ago. Cuyuna, 1982. The last shipment of ore left town, and in the back of the truck was our economic heart. There was no recharge. There was nothing left. It left. There was only opportunity to reinvent. In the late 1980s, a group of citizens, concerned citizens of the Cuyuna region, and mostly women, gathered together because they wanted to protect that history, that rich mining history, but they wanted to transform, completely transform a mine land into a destination outdoor recreation. Not just good for Cuyuna, not just good for Brainerd, but good for the world. This was in the 1980s. This was amazing. But their first goal was for the residents, to get the people of those towns, Crosby, Ironton, Deerwood, Cuyuna, Riverton, Manganese, outside, enjoying the land and respecting and taking ownership in that land. And ultimately, it was an opportunity for a new identity. They wanted a new identity for their region, an active, young recreation identity to replace the identity of failed industry that had been placed on their shoulders. Cuyuna, 2005, the first mile of the Cuyuna Lake State Paved Trail hits the ground. Cuyuna, 2011, 25 miles of purpose-built single track for mountain bikes are designed and constructed on that overburden that helped our country win both world wars. Later that year, Cuyuna was recognized as a top 25 destination in the world for mountain biking. On the way in, I checked it, we're 14. We're still doing okay. 5 years later, that's today. We're heading 2000, I wasn't good at math, I'm sorry. Ask any of my teachers, they're probably here. 5 years later, 12 new businesses on Main Street. 12. And a growing majority of the owners of those businesses, Dan, are the M's, the millennials. The millennials are coming. Folks, you got to hear this. There's yoga on Main Street, Crosby. Who would have ever thought yoga would be on Main Street, Crosby? It's happening. Remember? Active recreation community, purposeful and built. Nearly 30,000 visitors a year come here. And from our statistics, 60% of them didn't know what a Cuyuna was 5 years ago. They never heard of it, and they came because of the destination. And at this point, I have to say it, and kick a water, I guess, but I can hear what you're thinking. Well, that's dessert, Aaron. And dessert, it tastes great, but you cannot make a living on that. And I've heard it for 5 years. That's a great thing you have there, those trails, that outdoor rec, but you will never create a $90,000 a year job off of that. And we just simply say, we never intended to. That was never our goal. Our goal was simple. It was to attract and retain We had core competencies, and you have the same ones. It's called healthcare. We had to support our healthcare. It's manufacturing. It's K through 12 education. We built this outdoor recreation magnet so that they had an easier time recruiting the cream of the absolute crop, so they could have the best surgeons, the best physicians, the best educators, and the best engineers. And we believed back then that that is how we could move our community forward. And it's working. We understood that where we were at when our economic heart was removed, we had to start very small to get big. We had to start with the coffee shop. We didn't have one. We had to start with the brewery. We're going to have one because of the Entrepreneur Fund. That's worth a huge round of applause right there, in my mind. A brewery in Cuyuna. Huh? We knew we had to create the healthy components of a 21st century downtown community. Because how is someone else going to come and want to live there if they look around and go, why? It's the most dangerous question we cannot allow people to ask. Why? We have to prove why before they come and while they come, and we can do that here too. And as much fun as I'd like to talk about Cuyuna's success tonight, I'm not going to. I talked a little bit about it. But I want to explore as a group and as a region how Cuyuna became successful. Because the how is more important than the outcomes right now. And the number one thing that the folks way before me did is they listened. The art of listening was huge. The Minnesota off-road cyclists, they're from Minneapolis, St. Paul. They found Cuyuna. We didn't go looking for them. They brought with them an international company based in Colorado called the International Mountain Bicycling Association. They came, we would often refer to them as outsiders, right? They came to the Cuyuna Range, and what we saw were hills. They saw trails. And what we saw as rocks, they saw revenue. We did not see what they saw because we were not them. We had to ask. So we listened to what their pitch was. We heard them out. And eventually we got in the boat. And we built Cuyuna together with the state of Minnesota. And more importantly, we built it, but we didn't stop. We built 25 miles of trail. And it's really easy to say, okay, we're done. That was great. Have a great day. It's all going to be successful. Look, we're top 20 in the world. But it's not true. You have to continually invest. You have to continue to bring more to the table. Because the millennials who are coming have a been there, done that philosophy. And if they've done it one time, they don't have to do it again. To get a millennial to do 30 years in a row at one vacation resort is going to be very hard. Am I lying? Been there, done that, don't need to do it again. Unless, Dan, we create something new. New story. So before we grabbed the expansion shovels, because we were ready to go, we want to build more trail, right? We stopped. And we said, we asked residents and future residents, current businesses and future businesses, destination travelers that are coming from around the world, what can we do better? I mean, we love what we do. We think it's amazing. But until you ask someone else, you don't see how much room you have to grow. And we said, on our trail, what can we do better? In our town, what can we do better? We're building this for you. It's our town, right? But if we don't have them, we're going to be awfully lonely. How can we make it better for you? And 700 people responded in 30 days. They're there to help. And they had consistency in their answers that was crazy. It allowed us to create a to-do list right off of it, because there was so much consistency that said, you have to do this, you have to do that. If you do this, I'm not coming back, because they're the customers, and we have to listen to their voice. And the majority of the input was not locals. Again, there was people from outside our area helping us see the picture. And 2 years later, we're delivering 50% of that to-do list already. Because we believe if we can do what they want, it's going to do something big. Dan, you wrote a story, and I read it. The end.
Thank you.
No. You wrote a story recently on the downturns of mining economics and how they're getting closer to each other now. And on the rebound of the downturns, the strength is not as strong as it has been before. So we're having quicker downturns in between the cycles, and the rebound, we're getting weaker. And I was on my way to St. Paul to talk with some of our senators, and it hit me. What if that was your heart? What if that's what your doctor told you? And your cardiologist would say, well, based on these stats, I have bad news, Dan. You're having heart attacks. And Dan, worse yet, your heart attacks are more frequent than they've ever been before. And I don't want to tell you this, but I have to because you pay me. I'm your cardiologist. Your heart is losing its strength every time you have an attack. And then Dan's cardiologist hopefully will give him this advice. I'm not a cardiologist, by the way. Option 1, you need a transplant. And in Cuyuna, we had that transplant. Our new heart is called the Cuyuna Country State Rec Area. It has a major artery, an economic artery called the paved trail, and the other one's the mountain bike trail. It has soft tissues that have grown called scuba, paddleboarding, and kayaking. And it has these huge muscles that are growing that we didn't even know existed, calling pump tracks, gravel grinding, and raise your hand if you've heard this one, fat biking. Anyone? We didn't know that existed. We said, fat what? I thought they were referring to me. Like, come on. But on the Mesabi, thankfully, we don't need the transplant. We don't have to get rid of the heart, because the heart is mining. But the symptoms we are showing would mean we better listen to the option 2 that a cardiologist has for us. Our symptoms are indicating something. And option 1, again, was transplant. Option 2, your cardiologist comes to you and says, well, you need a lifestyle change. So tell me about how much you eat. Tell me about what you do. Tell me about all this. But in this case of economics, it's not lifestyle changes, it's quality of life changes. And what I mean by quality of life is it provides new muscles. It provides that diverse economy that can take the bust out of the range. The end goal is this. When mining needs some quiet time, it doesn't bring the whole region to its knees. It's going to happen. That's life. It's going to have cycles. But we have to build some other strong tissues of other economies. So when it goes down, it needs quiet time. It doesn't bring us all down. It's going to hurt, but it's not fatal. But how do you know how to create that? What is that? And that's the million-dollar question. Because the IRRB wants to know that. Everybody wants to know that. What is that? Is it a mountain bike trail? Is that going to solve it? I won't answer that question because it's being recorded. I think it's going to take more than that. But the best way, and what we've seen in Cuyuna, to predict the future in order to build it ahead of time is to ask the future. And the good news is the future's already here. And there's 90 million of them. And they call themselves the millennials. They are the biggest generation after the baby boomers. And they're bigger than the boomers in terms of numbers. And they are what's coming. And if we're not ready to provide what they need, we're going to have another issue. So here's my pitch. I finally got to it. 26 hours in, I got to my pitch. I would love for us to start this discussion. It goes like this. This is my radio voice. Millennials of Minnesota, hear our call. We want your help. We need your help. We are Mesabi. Consider our region as one community, one destination, one beating heart. Consider our total assets of recreation, industry, arts, and culture. Tell us, what should we invest into to make Mesabi your future home and a place for your future business? What do we need here so you can achieve the quality of life you desire and deserve? And when you ask that question, you have to prepare your mind and your heart to hear what's going to come. Because just like the great cardiologist that has to go to Dan, and you wouldn't think he'd have heart issues looking at him, but he's going to go to Dan and tell him tough news. He has to do this. He has to do that. Dan doesn't want to do that. His whole life he's done this. Well, if Dan doesn't change, goodbye, Dan. He won't be here again. And the same thing here. You're going to hear ideas that aren't easy, ideas you don't like, and some of them might not even make sense. And when you hear these ideas coming in from the future generation of Rangers or Minnesotans, or even if they're from Chicago, I don't care. The greater the input, the better the product. The reaction will be this. No, not here. My dad is really good at the first one. You want to do it for everybody? He's right there. Right there, everybody. So when I would tell him, that's a Finnish call for no. Anyway, I always wanted to give it back to him because he would always be up here and I'd be there. And then in the middle, he'd say, don't worry, Aaron, Mom called. They found your teddy bear. Every speech. So finally, I get him back. So back to the point. When you hear the ideas, you won't like them. That's the point. But be careful. Be very darn careful in that moment, because those ideas that strike you as never good might just be the ones you need to focus the most on. And here's why. When the Minnesota Off-Road Cyclists and the International Mountain Bicycling Association came to our Cuyuna Range community and told us, we think to strengthen your economy, you can do it through mountain bike trails. Our community told them, me, all of us, no, not here. And I'm not kidding. It turns out their idea was the best idea we never had. And thank God we listened. Thank you, Mork. Thank you, IMBA. Thank you, NPR. And thank you, Masabi.
Thank you, Aaron.